Emdol kake mofaseda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, an EVE Online podcast. I'm your host, Matterall. Today we're going to talk about a historied alliance called Mercenary Coalition. They've been around since the early days of EVE and are still active today. Not just active, but influential. We have some of the key members of long ago and of now. And so we're going to meet them and talk about what's going on with Mercenary Coalition these days. All right, first I'd like to introduce co-hosts and panel, which would be Carneros.
Good morning.
And wow, it looks like it's just you and me, Carneros. I didn't realize that, but great.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, we're getting into the holiday season. We'll have some shows that are going to be a little more special than usual, and we'll save the announcements for the end of the show. We have some announcements about this show to tell you. First, I'd like to introduce the figurehead of Mercenary Coalition, Celine.
Hello again.
And this is going to be very interesting because historically these figures are very important for new players. You won't know the history that happened 10, 12 years ago, but this will hopefully we'll get to some of that. I'd like to introduce Thole.
Hi, everyone.
What's your full name so people get that?
That would be Tholarium.
Tholarium.
Yeah.
And we also have Suez, but he was known as Shut Up and Shave back then.
Hi there.
Famous for, if I can say, singing the Little Bees song.
Thank you very much.
Among other things. And we have the diplomat from Mercenary Coalition, Danielle.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Very good. All right, thanks, Mercenary Coalition, for showing up. I'm sure there are more of you, but I think you guys are representative. One of the new things that's happened is Thole has joined Mercenary Coalition recently. Thole, can you tell us how that happened and how you came back to the game and stuff?
Yeah, how did that happen? Well, I could go the long and the short route, but I'll go for something in between. We, as in a group of players that I've played with since 2003, played back in the day in corporations, in Fountain Alliance, ATUC, Omega Corp, Curse Alliance. All of those entities were part of our playstyle back then. And during the 2003 to 2009 era, we all converged from those different paths into DICE, which was one of the main corporations in Band of Brothers back then in Bob, which is where I first met Celine and also kind of met Suas, I think, but then not really met, but saw in space. And during those years, mainly the Bob years, we flew a lot with MC when we contracted him and when we worked together. We had some serious epic fights over mainly the southern regions of EVE back then, but also in the north where the MC kind of held their own against a large portion of the alliances up there, while Bob was working on wars down south. I quit kind of after Bob took a fall in Delve in like 2008, 2009, and after that took like let's say 7-8 year break from the game. And as we all do at some time, I came back and kind of got psyched again, because the game now, I mean, I played it a long time ago, but the game now is so different from what it was back then that it's actually, for me, almost like a new game. And so when I came back, I started looking at, obviously, my old Corp DICE. I played in there for a while, but I also noticed that because of the game being so different to what I knew, I kind of had to reinvent myself again in this game, along with some of the old timers that I picked up along the route as I came back last year, and we formed a new corp called Project Manhattan. Bomb was the ticker, and we started playing from Bomb through like January-ish this year, and gradually picking up more of my old ATUC and Dice and CA Curse Alliance crew from back in the day. We had fun poking at our old nemesis Goonswarm for quite a few months, actually say almost a year now. And as we did that, we also kind of felt like we've kind of grown as a corp ourselves, and now we're looking out to be of influence again, as you might say. And we looked for an alliance that would suit our style, but also has people that we know and respect. And then I kind of contacted Celine, and one thing led to another, and actually it was only like 2 talks we had, and we were in. It was quite easy because I've known Celine from back then. I respect him and Mercenary Coalition a lot, and all of my guys were like pretty psyched about the offer that Celine made us to join them. So it was easy peasy after that.
Cool. Well, so you came back with a few guys. It wasn't just you. Some of the guys that are coming back are as old as you in this game, right?
Yeah, as old as me in the game, yeah. And also a bit older out of game. But I mean, yeah, you have to understand that when we played it back then, we were all pretty much students, right? So around the 18-ish up to 25 range. And as we quit around 2009, we all kind of got our lives in order, because playing it as we did takes a lot out of you. And as I came back, I started just contacting my old guys, But funny enough, we used MSN back then, right? So there was none of all this Discord and Slack and all of that. There was none of that. We had MSN and IRC. So it took me actually 5 to 6 months to get everyone's contacts again, and kind of start getting the word out that we were back. And then things slowly started increasing in numbers, and people coming back and going like, "Hey, I want to try this again because it's cool. It's different now, Eve."
Yeah. Well, Celine, was that what was that like on your end?
Oh, which part? What, finding one of my long lost loves?
Yeah, getting reunited.
It was pretty interesting. This whole year has been kind of neat because due to various different things. I think it was on your show that Molly was on recently, and it seems like all of Thal isn't kidding. He's got some really old school guys in there, like Fisho and a few others that I haven't seen in years. And it's like all the zombies are rising out of the graveyard, and everybody's starting to talk about things that happened back in the day and how it kind of compares to now. And it's really been a lot of fun getting to talk to these folks who I haven't seen in years and years and years. And the fact that Thal was active and a lot of his guys were, and they were looking for a home, it's an excellent fit because, as all of you guys know, regardless of what goes on in the fabric of the game itself, you like to play with friends, and it's good to reconnect with old friends and then do stuff together. So it's awesome. I'm really, really happy.
And Thal, these aren't just old players that were around. These guys were like the FCs of the old players, right? Thal, like what was it like being in a fleet back then?
It was so different from fleets nowadays. It's mainly because of all the added structure and tools that you have now as an FC, right? So back then, you didn't have right-click align in the early days. You didn't have gang warps. You didn't have all of that stuff. So as an FC, you really had to coach all your guys and count down the warps, tell them to double-click in space somewhere.
Mixed fleets.
Yeah,
no doctrines, no logic.
No doctrines. Yeah. So everyone's just bringing a battleship. It was very very different.
Just bring what you built, right?
Bring what you built. Well, up to some point, right? We I mean, in the ATIC days, we kind of at some point specialized in Tempests, for example, because Tempest could outrange other battleships. But it was still, I mean, if you couldn't fly a Tempest because you didn't cross train back then, you just trained one race. So I could fly Caldari or Amarr or Minmatar or whatever. So if you went full Amarr and we all switched to Tempest, yeah, you were fucked pretty much. So the name of the game back then was either range or short range, and some support, but like rifters and not all of this fancy tackling stuff that we have now. The game has evolved and become way more complex, also in terms of ships, right? The amount of ship types we had back then, maybe 6, 7, 8 in the beginning. Now, I mean, you have dozens and dozens of ship types. And when I came back, one of the first things that was hard for me was just finding out how all these ships worked, because there's so many of them now. And you know, the first couple of times, I can remember engaging a Gila in my saber, going yeehaw, and I was like, oh, what's this? It's like, it's different. It's different. That's in complexity, in tools, and in added out of game things like Discord and Twitch and all that stuff.
Yeah. So you just answered the question asked by the Inimical, that was asking if it was more complicated with all the choices that you have now, and basically you're saying yes.
Yeah, very, very more complicated. Back then, it was a simpler game. You know, maybe that's why I was good at it back then. Because when I came back, I was like, oh, I mean, this is a whole other level, and it takes, I think it takes more time to get good at it now.
Yeah. I think somebody said basically we saw EVE as Counter-Strike, you know, with 20-man gangs, basically.
Yeah,
and that's what it was like.
Yeah.
I think the best analogy I can give is to like the differences between now and then is I probably played the game for 9 months before I even saw my first battleship back in 2003. And now they're just literally giving battleships away for PvE activity. The game has definitely changed.
Right. Now, Sue, you're from back then too, right?
Yeah. I was actually in an alliance. I was actually in an alliance with Thol called Five.
Oh yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And interestingly, when the Five split up, it had a pretty important effect on Goonswarm's history. Dice joined Bob, and Thol, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Dice joined Bob, and Black Omega went back to Syndicate.
Right.
And there was like a point where Bob weren't sure whether they wanted to scoop goons under their wing or eradicate them. And I think the decision was in the end to eradicate them. And that's really what pushed Black Omega and myself into bed with Goonswarm in a big way, which then led to, for example, Omega and myself. Do you remember Omega with 2 E's from RA?
Yeah.
He actually moved to the UK a few years ago. He's a good friend of mine now. Yeah,
cool.
Which led to the chats, which led to Red Swarm Federation. So that quite interestingly, the breakup of the Five and the way it broke up ended up really cementing Goonswarm and Red Swarm Federation in the end.
That was the beginning of it all.
Yeah, agreed.
Lady Scarlet, who couldn't be here today, was also part of the Five, I believe.
Yeah, she was in ATUC and later in DICE. So she was part of the Five and part of the ATUC leadership back then.
Again, as well, we're talking about seeing EVE as Counter-Strike, and I think whilst a lot of people did, it's those that didn't that really made the game different. For example, the leadership of ATUC, Sir Molly, those that really started carving empires out, be it kind of roaming empires, much like people see PLAs now. I think the Five were a lot like that. Or you had the huge super empire like Bob was. Those that started seeing the game slightly different built. They created the building blocks to the big empires that we have now. I think they provide the template.
Yeah, I mean, and the big difference. I mean, why was Bob or the Five at that point more powerful than the rest? Was mainly organization, right?
Yeah, completely agreed.
it had everything to do with organization and discipline. Because of all of the stuff that you couldn't have tools for back then, or you didn't have tools for back then that you had to do. If you had discipline and guys that knew what they were doing, and some organization, like people that were really committed to getting logistics sorted and all that, you were ahead of the game back then, and that's what we were better at. Mainly at what Sue said, mainly at the non-shooty part, but the part around that.
Well, that was Goonswarm's big secret. They kind of styled themselves as these random people, kind of zergs that go around and just attack everything. But behind that, the kind of upper and middle management, it's better than some tier 1 companies that are around at the moment. I'm sure it still is.
Yeah, it is, at least from where I can see. But they had some failed experiments too, right? I mean, Goons were essentially, weren't they your pet project? It was something that you were helping to kind of foster.
I don't think that's fair on the Goons. I mean, I felt like Black Amiga took them under our wing, but they were already doing the kind of middle management that would make them great. I think there were a couple of key fights up in Syndicate that we were quite useful for, but other than that, I do felt like I kind of just got swept along with the wave.
Okay, because from what I heard from Lady Scarlet and some of these older stories was that you were kind of on their behalf, kind of saying like, kind of being a diplomat for them, protecting them.
Yeah, in the early days, I think during the RSF war, when Bob actually invaded, I think I took a bit more of an active hand. I think I was whatever it's called, the Sky Marshal with Sesfan, so like the EU Sky Marshal. But it was more just a matter of lending experience. If you go and do this, then people are gonna get annoyed and shoot you.
Right. Well, so it's interesting. Let me get this straight, though. Was there a meeting where Bob basically said, do we like these guys? Do we want to eradicate them? And you said there was a decision to actually do that. And that's actually what was the first, I guess, stake in this long railroad track of history?
Was there a meeting? I mean, in Bob, we didn't make decisions like that. We didn't go to like, okay, we have a meeting on Monday, and then one Monday everyone brings their points to the table, and then we decide. It was more organic than that. And I think what cemented our decision to go for Goons, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was some guy making fun of someone that died. I think it was on the forums. I think it was something along those lines. Someone from Goons that was mocking it. And back in those days, we didn't have the vileness of the internet as we have it now. I think it was a little bit more
gentlemanly.
Yeah, it was a little bit more gentlemanly. Yeah, more civilized. So there was like an outrage that someone would mock something like that. And nowadays, no one would bat an eye if that happens. But still, back then, that was a big thing. And we felt, Bob felt, as kind of like the protectors, the guardians of the galaxy. Back then we had the keys to the Eve universe. Someone did something we didn't like, we were going to fuck them up, and it was kind of an organic decision like that. I think Mole kind of saw something on those lines and just posted there, "We're coming for you." That was that. No meeting, nothing, just Mole posted.
There are no Goons, I believe, was the
something along those lines. I can't remember what it exactly was, but it was close.
He covered this in the show that was done a couple of months ago. I think he went into a bit of detail. That show was almost 2 hours long, so if you really want to know the history of that, I'm sure that Matt can hook you up with that link.
Yeah, we'll do something again like that. We'll have more stuff in the holidays about history. But real quick, what was it like working with Mole? Because you were a CEO of a corporation. And what was like a corporation compared to an alliance back then? What was that relationship like?
It was way different. I mean, back then we had alliances consisting of 5 corporations, right? The 5 were mentioned, the 5, because it was 5 corporations. We could field 150 dudes and more with 5 corporations. My own corporation back then, ATUC, Dice, we could field 50 to 60 people. So the dynamic in an alliance was different because there was only 5 figureheads in Bob. Later, there was a few corps that were added, but in the 5 as well. And in Bob, working with Mole, I mean, I loved it because Mole was the type of person that I am in this game. You know, what we like to do in this game is test our mettle. You know, what we like to do is go up against it, outnumbered against the odds, and then win, because that's what's extra fun. Now, everyone can win when you get 200 dudes on your side against 20, and you got them perma bubbled and whatever. But what we liked was pitting us against the challenge, and I think the story back then was kind of that we did the opposite, like that we kind of steamrolled everyone because we were this big. But Bob was never the biggest alliance out there. We were just the most organized, and we would get everyone that was online in a fleet, compared to other alliances that would only maybe get a quarter or half in their fleets.
Did you have activity requirements and stuff?
No, none of that shit. You know why? Because if you're having fun like that, everyone wants to join. Everyone wants to join. If you're on the winning team, that's how it is in Eve. Everyone wants to join. If you're on the losing team, people will start pulling out. And in the end, when Bob died, we saw some of that as well for Bob, right? So it's a natural thing for alliances to go through. I think a natural cycle. But a big part of how we worked back then was we knew we were good and we won, and that's why people in our corps kept logging in and coming to the fight. Amol was a great figurehead. He did a lot of things right. In the end, we bit off more than we could chew. So be it. I mean, it was a fun ride till the end. That was for sure a hell of a lot of fun. And I think if you ask anyone in Bob, they will all say Mole did a great job. Did a hell of a job.
Let's swing back real quick to a little point in history that's really misinterpreted all the time. Suez, can you tell us who said the thing that pissed off Band of Brothers that created the wars?
Yeah, it was a guy called Tetsujin, and the other thing was it was said on a private forum. It wasn't said publicly. It wasn't said in local or broadcast. It was something that was said. It was a kind of in joke, and it was very much in keeping with the something awful humor of the time. I mean, I'm not defending it. I'm literally trying to state facts.
Oh, I love that, because that's been misinterpreted as being remedial in local in front of a station. Like that's what we've heard.
No,
I mean, remedial didn't help. I mean, my understanding was Bob kind of went, hang on a minute, what the hell's this? And remedial was like, ha ha, yeah, ha ha, and then repeated it.
So he doubled down on it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting to get that cleared up, though. So it was something that was said by goons in a private channel, and then when they were called on it, they defended it very publicly, and it made things worse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of using kind of, and this isn't actually a statement about Bob. I'm not a huge fan of kind of using real life stuff to further space wars, and I actually felt like that was what Remedial was doing at the time. He was just using it as a publicity stunt.
Oh, I got you. Well, that's interesting, because that's a little tidbit from history that is kind of pivotal in the narrative.
I think Thol's left channel, by the way.
Yeah, he got dropped.
Okay. Probably got dropped by his wife. He did have to go. We knew that, so we wanted to get as much out of him as possible. But let me bring Celine back in here, and then...
We got Thal for a couple more minutes, so you might want to hit him up.
Oh, do I?
Well, he did. Now he's gone again. There it is.
He's coming and going. All right. Well, if he can talk, then we'll let him say a few more things before he takes off. Thol and I know each other because, of course, Destructive Influence, Dice Corporation. He used to be the CEO and FC of Dice back, pretty much when it began. And before that, he had already a career in Arcane Technologies, ATUC, which is a very popular corporation. So it was nice to see him come back to the show.
Yeah, I think he underplayed his efforts in the five as well. I mean, ATUC were he's back now, but ATUC were the absolute powerhouse that drove that entire alliance. He kind of said 50 to 60 dudes in a 150-man fleet, but I personally remember there being 80 to 100 at times. And for those days, it was absolutely unheard of. It was something else.
And to put that in perspective, there was maybe fights with 20 to 30, 40 people. And is that what was normal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, there was the biggest fight to date was the Battle of VV-VCR. And again, I may be wrong, but I think that had about 250 people in it. So when you think that one alliance was able to field 150 to 200, that was scary for people.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. All right. So, Thole, you still with us? I assume you can hear us. All right. So, Mercenary Coalition, though, we did do a little bit of history here. Mercenary Coalition, can you tell us, let's go back in time real quick and bring it all the way up to today and what you're doing today. But first, let's start with the early Mercenary Coalition. How did it come together?
I was an Earth and Beyond refugee and saw a picture of a Bantam undocking from a station in the beta version of Eve, and there's this gigantic space station and this cool looking little ship. Actually, it looked like shit, but we didn't know that back then. And it was awe-inspiring, just the imagery. And I'm like, wow, I want to get a piece of that. So I ended up getting into the beta and brought a few of my friends over who had been in Earth and Beyond as well, and most of those folks were part of my Dungeons and Dragons gaming group when I was back in the military. And we started playing the game together. We started a little industry corp, ended up moving out to Curse, and then got caught up in the big Stain Alliance, Curse Alliance wars of the day. We were Stain Alliance as opposed to Thole, who was a filthy Curse Alliance guy.
Boo.
Yeah, and somewhere towards the end of 2003, whenever the Conquerable stations got introduced and Station Ping Pong became a thing, I got a little bit burnt out and I wanted to try something different. So I decided to become like a pirate, but I didn't want to do that on my main character because that would be bad. So I created this. I didn't have a female character, so I created a female character, and I said I'm going to be an evil pirate. And that was Celine, and started a corporation called Body Count because that was a cool band that Ice-T had back in the day, and I thought I'd just go around Losec and kill some scrubs, and actually had a lot of fun with it, and made friends with a corporation called Space Invaders, who were kind of a big deal. They were about a tick below where Moo was back at the time. They weren't quite as big or well known, but they did have a presence, and they had Drunken Master and Viceroy and a few other names. And I joined up with them for about 2 or 3 months, and that was whenever I really learned a lot about how to properly utilize different mechanics and really PvP properly. But then something happened to the leadership of that corp. They ended up going away, and so I found myself kind of alone. And I called up my buddies, and we had a meeting in Pizza Hut. And
headquarters.
We had a meeting in Pizza Hut, and we were just like, all right, guys, what are we going to do? This game's really cool, but And we decided to just try something that no one else had been doing before. We said, well, why don't we try being mercenaries? Why don't we try to see what if people would actually just because that's a missing component. There's no mechanic for it. There's no anything. I mean, this was back before there weren't mechanics for anything. There were no mechanics for alliances. Everybody was just making up whatever they were doing as they went along. And we made a post on the forums basically saying, hi, we are a mercenary corp. We will kill your enemies for money. And within a day and a half, we had some group from also Earth and Beyond who hated another group who had come over from Earth and Beyond and wanted to pay us 60 million ISK to kill them. Cool. And we did, and we spent 3 days. Started on a Friday, and by that Sunday, we like killed 2 of their mining ops, and like cruise missile. We were flying cruise missile crows and blackbirds, and I think we had a single scorpion to our name, and we just completely decimated these poor bastards. And they ended up actually like, I think they probably all ended up rage quitting Eve. I got my first real life death threat during that contract. A guy named Malik Bloodmoon was really mad at me for blowing up his MOA, and was going to petition me for grief tactics. And that was where it all started, and it just kind of snowballed from there. You know, I made a little video. It got some attention, and then we got another contract, another one, and so on and so forth. And then it just kind of caught its own momentum, and that's where it started.
Wow. Sorry. Recovering from a cold here. So the people that hired you, that wasn't Evolution, was it?
No. I can't. The funny thing is, I can remember the target of the name of the first corp. The name of the first corp was a corp named Jirai Blood. And for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the dude or the corp that hired us. Just that it was like 10 guys that were mad at like 10 or 12 other guys.
Well, grudges were so small but meaningful.
Yeah. But I mean, it was cool. I think we lost like a single thorax over that weekend. So, you know, we made like 5 times what we lost. So we were really happy. It was, hey, this is going to work. Yay. You know?
So you knew it was going to work, and then you guys start to see the game changing, and they introduce alliances, and they introduce Titans. You guys were one of the first owners of a Titan, right?
Not quite first.
Top 10.
Top 10, yeah. I think my Ragnarok was the second one. Guy named Orange Species in Bob had the first Ragnarok, and there might have been a Russian guy who built his right before or right after mine, and he had a name that was unpronounceable that started with an X, and he came along, and so yeah. But I believe it was in the first 10. What we decided to do, ours was a little different though. Everybody, like Molly was famous for like, you know, tanking his up and jumping it in and all this other shit, but we made a nano Ragnarok. We put poly rigs in it and basically made it to where it could warp onto grid, set off the area of effect Doomsday, and warp off within 9 seconds. It was quite annoying to people.
Yeah, that's what was very specific about yours. It was a shield ship, so it could move faster, and you were able to deploy it in a pretty scary way. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I remember Orange Species as well. That guy must have had an awful lot of Ritalin or something. I think he stayed up for 24 hours a day for about 2 weeks in a row when we were fighting the Bob War. I
think that if you look at like the people who were doing this shit back then, there were so many college students and so many even like high school students who honestly didn't need sleep and didn't sleep enough, and that was what sustained the game back then. I mean, you know, that like when I was like that first contract I was talking about, when we were logging in, you know, there were 2,800 people online, you know, on like a Friday night. So it didn't get to a point where, and even like 2-3 years later, it wasn't until the game had been live for 2 or 3 years that you saw anything even remotely close to like 15,000-20,000 people being online.
Yeah. What was it like seeing the game grow up from its infancy for you or Suez?
I joined a little bit later than Celine. I think I joined in 2006. It's CCP have done a good job at making it different games. I think they've tailored the kind of rules of the game to the size, and they've not always got it right. I mean, we know that, but I think given how little major things they can really change, you know, they can't kind of roll back or reverse decisions particularly easily. We've seen the game change absolutely dramatically. As Thor was saying earlier, actually, it really is a different game, and it's been a different game maybe 3 times in the break that he had as well. And I think it's real credit to CCP there.
Yeah, they've managed to make it interesting in each iteration. Well, okay, so let's move forward to I'll just skip over this because we talked about it on the show with Molly, with Sir Molly a few months back, and that was the Mercenary Coalition goes on to make a name for themselves in the Northern Campaign, where they beat up on the Northern Coalition that was much bigger than them, and to great effect.
Now we had a lot of help. It was kind of like we were the tip of the spear, and once a few key battles were won, there was a lot of people coming along for the ride that made it to where we had fleets large enough to make it actually really work and be more than just kind of like a nice little insurgency. It turned into a bit of a steamroll towards the end.
That's always the way, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
The fail cascade.
Exactly.
And then you ended up looking for a home at a certain point, and that was the Tortuga campaign.
Tortuga wasn't much of a campaign, really. It was just I did cover this, and the extremely short version of this is, if you want to hear, like I said, if you want to hear the longer version, go listen to the show with Molly, because it's really entertaining, because he's got some stories as well. The short version of this was that I was working for CCP at the time, and they wanted me to step away from the game, so I had to basically turn the Alliance over, and the Alliance wanted to go one direction, I wanted to go another direction, but since I wasn't going to be able to play anymore, I couldn't really, tell them not to do what they want to do. Well, they were a lot of dudes that were kind of hot under the collar at some stuff that had happened behind the scenes between MC and Bob. So they just thought it would be, the greatest idea ever to start attacking Bob shit in the South and take over region since Goons and everybody else were coming for them. My plan at the time was to go up north and take over Declan and kick Tri out of Declan, the first version of Triumvirate, actually, not the 8th or the 9th that they're on now. And they and cut a deal with Koth Fluff and those guys, and just kind of like turn things around a bit. And but none of that had got the chance to happen, because the guys that were in charge decided to do it their way. And then the guy that was actually going to be running the Alliance in my absence got sick, like seriously ill. And so I had to keep playing, and I was under all this pressure to like step back, on top of which now I was in the middle of fighting a war that I really didn't want to, that my heart really just was not in. And the results of what happened, speak for themselves. It didn't go the way it was supposed to. Things didn't happen. Balls got dropped. And within like 4 or 5 months, I just shuttered the Alliance. I was just like, no, this isn't my Alliance anymore. This isn't what I want to do in the game. These were bad decisions, and I'm out. And that was Tortuga, basically, in a very brief nutshell.
Right. Nutshell, turtle shell. And then you were over in working for CCP, developing parts of Apocrypha, right?
No, it wasn't parts of it. I started actually working in CCP in late November, November of 2006, and left in 2010, a little over 3 years. The first thing I actually touched was in the Revelations 2 expansion, the Solve levels, Solve 1, 2, and 3. That was a big part of that was me. Actually, a very large part of that was me. Solve 4 was not me. That was something that was added on by another dev who, for some reason, thought that it would be a great idea to make systems invulnerable to attack, even though myself and everybody else who's actually playing the game told him, it's like, no, you're just going to see endless super capitals built in these invulnerable systems. But he didn't listen. So you got Solve 4 invulnerable bullshit. And that was the first thing. And then there was some other stuff that came later, but then Apocrypha came along, and Apocrypha was myself and CCP Grayscale coming up with our joint love of David Weber, and the way that if you've ever read any of the Honor Harrington books, you'll be familiar with the way that wormholes and stuff work in that universe, or jump points as he calls them, where they use mass in order to determine how many ships can go through, or how many at one time can go through, and how they regenerate. And that's kind of where the mechanics for wormholes came from. And
so in a weird way, let me interrupt you. You're kind of the grandfather of wormholes in EVE Online.
The design for wormholes was pretty much exclusively myself and Grayscale. He actually created and pushed the button that brought them all to life. But he and I worked for about 2 or 3 months on the initial design and getting them all in. There was the actual wormhole team, then there was the strategic cruiser team, and there were like 2 or 3 other ones. But yeah, it was it was a lot of fun. I mean, we were basically told just, I mean, we were literally sitting at home. I got a phone call. It's like, we want to add wormholes to the game, and we want you and Matt to work on it. Like, okay, cool. And that was where it started, and we just pulled the rest of it out of our ass, and it actually worked. Apocrypha was probably one of the only expansions that I think this game has ever had, where the designers were literally given free reign and full resources to implement every level of what it was that they said they wanted. There was almost nothing that we asked for that expansion. Apocrypha did not get programming time, did not get art, and did not get implemented. So, which stands as
one of the best expansions ever in EVE Online. Still my favorite expansion ever.
Yeah, but then the contrast to that was the follow-up, which was Dominion, which was middle management interference at its absolute worst, because that was, you're starting to, a lot of the stuff you're seeing now in the game is, with Citadels and sort of Fawzi Saw, but not really, and a bunch of it. There was a lot of things that were born as what was supposed to be part of Dominion and never saw the light of day, and now they're starting to see things come out now. But that, if you want to have like, I can get my producer at the time, CCP Whisper, is also an MC now. I could get him into this, and I could pull in. And if you want to have a show about like all that stuff, all of our NDAs are expired.
Oh, so let's do it.
You should probably.
That sounds good.
You should probably before we get too deep down that rabbit hole, I'd say maybe have a show in a few weeks about like that stuff. That would be a lot of fun to talk about.
Well, we will circle back on this. I think it'd be incredibly interesting for people who are around and people who are around now, because they can see the roots of how a lot of the problems that we're facing, or the challenges, or even the cool stuff in EVE goes back to those days. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. All right. Want to move forward a little bit then. Were you also in CSM?
Yes, I was. I was on CSM 6 and CSM 7.
Both those were pivotal, right? Because I was in the middle of Incarno, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was
Summer of Rage.
Yeah, it was interesting times, to say the least. I mean, I was in the meetings where, they said, hey, look, we've got all these cool things. Oh, cool. We're going to have pants and skirts and shoes, and we're not going to have iterations on Solve, but yeah, we got this. I guess that's great. How much is this stuff going to cost? Oh, you don't know. It's releasing in a month, and you don't know what it's going to cost. Well, maybe I should think about that. And
I remember that meeting.
Yeah,
I bet you do, buddy. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
To make it clear to the audience, so Celine is no longer a dev. He's now a CSM. He's back as a player, and he's now a CSM member, a player representative. But Carneros is now a CCP dev, and this is the area that he's handling, is the marketing.
So I was the one on the other side saying, no, we don't have the prices yet.
Yeah, I read your story, the follow-up of what happened internally after that meeting and leading up to it. And man, I wanted to give you a big hug, because Jesus Christ.
Okay. And there's like a third show there to spawn off, is going back to that really pivotal time, because would you guys agree, and this is open to anybody, that changed the direction of EVE Online, or what happened there in perspective, looking at it back from today?
I'd like to hear what Karn has to say about it, to be honest.
Well, every company has its strengths and its weaknesses in doing game development. Estimating how long something was going to take at that time was variably effective on each of the dev teams. They didn't. Things that they all bit off at the beginning of the development cycle didn't all finish at the same time. It's like when you're going to cook a dinner and you've got 8 different courses that you want to have all time to get done at the same time. We couldn't do that. So when it got close to Incarna launch, and they went around to each team and said, what are you going to have ready on day one? Team Stonehenge, the one I was on, was the only one that had something ready on day one, and it was completely not what they needed to have ready. It was the next store in the stations. I don't know if you remember that one. What did that stand for? something exchange,
Noble Exchange.
the Noble Exchange store. How could I not remember this stuff? I lived it. So
Because you're still a game developer and you're doing things in real life, and
but
that was a long
that
time ago.
so my team, then I was the product owner, was responsible for delivering that store and items in it, including the famous monocle and including the scorpion skin, the famous scorpion skin that got us in trouble later, Silver Blink and all that.
That's the oh yeah, I've forgotten the name of it as well. Sorry.
Yes.
If you can watch, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so we had a variety of things that were ready for the store, and we showed these in the meetings to the CSM, and they're like, "Okay, it looks cool. Yeah, the visuals were good. What are you going to, charge for it? We don't know yet." I mean, I had a spreadsheet in the back and no approvals for any of it. That's and when we came down to that meeting and said what's going to be ready, and that only the store, I tried to say no, we can't launch with the store. It will if that's the only thing that's new, it will change the definition of what Incarnate is to just be about a store and microtransactions. You could do it 2 weeks later, but it has to be behind something else. Put functionality first, put some kind of feature first, not this. But we couldn't. We had to be on time.
Yeah, you called that one because that's how it was seen as to the players. Incarnate was just a microtransaction nightmare come true, because at the time microtransactions were just at the time being developed.
And we were just trying to learn how. It was the hot thing in the industry at the time, and we didn't, we wanted to try something and learn something. We didn't intend to make any money with it.
Okay, well, that's another interesting, topic we can get deep into, which I actually would love to hear more about that. But because we're talking about MC, we're going to move it along and talk about. So after around this time, MC, what's going on with MC after when you're the CSM member? Do you guys go on a break after that?
It wasn't you guys. I just, like I said, I shut the alliance down for years. I kept my corp intact, handed a CEO-ship over to another guy, let it run while I was at the company, and then I got out. Took it back over. We spent a couple years in AAA and Against All Authorities back when they were really good, before they got bad, and that was actually a lot of fun because me and Evil Thug had been like old enemies for years and years and years, and then we found out on MSN Messenger we somehow had a chat one day and found out that we had a mutual love of the same kinds of music, which was kind of surprising because he liked Madonna too. Thought that was weird for a Russian warlord, and we ended up in his alliance for a while, and then when he left the game, and it just kind of lost its flavor after a while, and we ended up in PL, and I spent 4.5 years in Pandemic Legion, which was mostly fun. There's still a lot of guys in there that I love to death. But as an alliance, just it was a good fit in terms of content, but not so much culturally for a lot of my guys. It's kind of weird to say that considering we spent over 4 years there, but that was mainly because we made a lot of friends and there were a lot of good people there that there still are. I mean, I love like Grath and Elise and a bunch of the other ones, but
what was the cultural difference?
I think the easiest way to sum that up is to actually bring it back and talk about MC just a little bit. Because what happened was that I had actually reached a point where I had stopped playing almost completely sometime around the end of 2014. I'd probably reached my point where I was ready to win EVE, by leaving. And I'd actually started playing other games, which was a first for me in almost a decade. There's a lot of other games out there. If you guys didn't know that, there's other games than EVE. And then a friend of mine who'd been a director of my corp for 4 or 5 years, Saber Ray, he wanted to just try something different. And he asked me, so like, listen, I think it's been like 7 or 8 years now. I would like to try to get MC back off the ground again because I just want to try something, else. And it took him about a week to convince me. And I figured, okay, well, I'm not really paying that much attention anymore. I'll let him do it. And he did. And, stumbled a bit getting out of the gate, but then he picked up a couple of corps, Corelli, who was like a really old corp back in the day. And they still got their original CEO, Josh Vertain, and got a couple of really good FCs and some great folks. And then Noir, who have been mercenaries forever and ever and ever and ever. They joined, and it just started to pick up momentum. And instead of the inevitable kind of implosion that I was expecting, it just sort of died out. It just kept going and getting better, and it didn't die out. So I kind of got reinvigorated, put an alt in, and then eventually decided to pull my corp out of PL and try to breathe some life back into it by putting it back in MC. And that was so MC started back up in about January 15. I put my corp back in MC in November 15, and took back over the leadership of the Alliance earlier this year in about February. And we've just been steadily, trying to find I wouldn't say find our feet. Anytime that you build something back up from scratch, there's several phases that you go through, and every year we kind of look at what we've done and look at ways that we can do things better and improve things using all the lessons that the various older members have learned over the years. But to answer your other question with regard to the culture differences, the motto of MC is, as corny as it sounds, it's about the person next to you. The internal workings of the Alliance are extremely geared towards the community, the real life relationships. We don't tolerate harassment or bullying or anything like that. We come down on it really, really hard. As a result, we have a very strong community, and that shows when we do the Vegas meets and go to Iceland. We always have like 40, 50 dudes. Hell, we had 40 dudes in London, which was ridiculous. Okay. And we don't really go for the public smacking thing. You don't see us on Reddit much. You're not going to see us. We don't like ever talking local hardly at all, which drives some people crazy, but that's fine because it's about what we do for each other and having fun. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that PL isn't like those guys are also friends, and they do a lot of actually really cool shit for their members as well. I guess it's just more along the lines they're a bit more hostile and a bit more prone to just telling people exactly what they think instead of trying to maybe be a little nicer about it. And I think that's all it is. I think that MC is just a little nicer. That's all.
Well, we'll come back to this topic and ask Danielle what she thinks too. But okay, so you left PL, you end up in reinvigorating. Now, was that Eve Vegas about 3 years ago that MC came back to life?
Well, no, MC was already doing pretty good. Like I said, it started back up in 15, but 16, Eve Vegas 16 is whenever we had the suite, and when we had damn near 50 dudes there, and that was kind of a watermark moment. I will admit that, because it was the first time that a lot of the newer corps and the older members had a chance to actually meet each other and talk to each other. And anytime that you do something where you get the real life people behind the scenes involved, and you can just sit down face to face and say, well, I think this is fucked up. Well, I think that you're fucked up. Oh, okay. Well, let's have a drink about that. And, and it always helps. And anybody that's gone to any of these meets, I mean, how I when I was in London a few weeks ago, how I gave cupcakes. I gave MC cupcakes to Snuffbox and Initiative, because, why not? We're all playing the same game. It's all about fun. And that's the part of the game I like the most, is the relationships and the friendships that you build as part of the game. The stuff that happens in the game is also fun, but it's sort of a secondary thing, at least for myself on most days.
Yeah. So you guys were there the year before, though. There was a kind of a 15 person.
Yeah, it was Saber and those guys were there that year. Yeah.
And that's when they were taking pictures, and they just had a big presence because they wear uniforms, and so they look very organized. But then the next year is when you had the party suite, and that's where Danielle, you and I met, right?
Yep.
That was a good party. You had that place full.
Yeah, it was an extremely good turnout, and I was excited because that was the first Eve meetup that I'd ever been to. Actually, it was the first gaming meetup I'd ever been to.
Yeah. I can tell because you look very normal. That's so rude to everybody else, but not you. But no, you look like, somebody could be your neighbor and was, and here you were taking care of all these guys because you were the diplomat and kind of helping it get organized, and you were super nice to guests.
She's our mom. She keeps all of us in check, really.
I try to, at least.
So I was wondering if you were still doing that, and what that's like. Has it taken a toll on you or anything?
I love doing it. For me, the main part of Eve that I really enjoy is the community. So in MC, my main focus is on the community itself. It's not actually on the game itself. And so even outside of Eve, I like meeting up with people and everything else, and from inside MC and outside of MC, because you can never have too many friends. So
Yeah. Well, so how did that night go for you? Because you were seemed like you were kind of working, you were moving around and making sure everybody's okay.
I went really well. I had fun. I met everybody. I got to meet, because I also, a couple years ago, I started kind of an initiative to help with new players and that kind of thing. And I got to meet several of the new players that I helped, and I also got to meet a whole bunch of the guys from the different new player corps that helped me with it. So that was just, it was a lot of fun. I got to meet quite a few people from Broadcast from Reps, um, and just and then just people that I've met through doing diplomacy in general. So it was really neat, just kind of getting to put faces to all of the names and actually meeting them in person. And you learn so much from somebody when you actually see them in person, compared to just hearing their voices or texting back and forth. And then when you actually get to meet that person, you're like, oh, okay, you kind of, I don't know, it kind of all winds it up and where you understand them a little bit better.
Now, does that mean necessarily that you become friendlier? Like you don't want to attack people?
Well, see, that's kind of the thing. In MC, they are all the evil warlords, and love to kill everything. And I'm kind of like the gentle soul that stands behind them, and it's like, yeah, you boys go have fun, and, and I'm gonna go be nice.
Have fun
She
storming
says
the
that.
castle.
She says that, but the fact of the matter is that if something gets elevated to the point where Danny's involved, most people calm down really fast because they don't want to have a chat with her, because they know that it's gotten extremely serious if it's reached her level.
So she's the velvet glove, I guess.
Pretty much.
She's our version of Lady Scarlet. Let me just put it that way. And she has saved me on multiple occasions from having to go to a hospital with stomach problems. I love her to death.
Too much stress. So that's nice.
Yeah. I do want to throw one thing. You bring up the Vegas thing in the suite, and we all seem to be slightly older gentlemen here. If you ever do a suite in Vegas, or CCP ever does like a thing where you win the suite, give it to someone who's under 30 that doesn't need sleep, because I made the mistake of like saying, oh sure, yeah, okay, I'll do the suite thing. I regretted it every night. I never got I think I slept maybe a total of 10 hours over 4 days. It was a lot of fun, but not good for you at all.
Right. And the next morning having to go out there and there's like bottles everywhere.
Yeah, I remember you disappeared into the back room there, and people would still go in there looking for you.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, that was a fun time. It was nice it kind of changed my whole opinion of MC that I didn't know very well, just by reputation and stuff. But then I realized, like, oh, what nice people. And Suis, you were not part of MC for a long time. You're a relatively new merge, but you're just as historic a player. So what is your background?
Okay, I'll try and be brief, because I've been doing this for a while. I started playing Homeworld with a bunch of guys, and we actually played against people like Sir Molly, which was super interesting coming into Eve. So we all played. A handful of people started playing Eve, and then there was a guy called Skull HSC who was the CEO boss, and he was also he was an amazing fleet commander, and he basically wanted to quit, and he knew that I was comfortable holding a group of people together. So he brought me on board. Him and a guy called Thor kind of fast-tracked me to the CEO ship because neither of them wanted it anymore. And then I kind of took the corp for six months or so, just trying to find my feet, really. And that's where we met Goons. And I actually ended up leaving Goons, leaving Black Omega for a few years to help with Goonswarm, especially when they were going through the Bob invasion and stuff like that. It was a really, really tough time. I think Goon fleet sizes, which you guys may find ridiculous now. I mean, we were still 2,000 or 3,000 people, which was huge in the game, but our fleet numbers were down to about 20 people. We had in the game at the time things called remote doomsdays. So what you could do is you could sit your Titan in a POS. And correct me if I'm wrong, Celine, because we didn't have any Titans, so the exact mechanic I never got to try. Sit your Titan in a POS, someone warps in a Kestrel into the middle of your fleet, they light a Cyno, and you right-click on your Titan and kind of say Doomsday 2 or something, like Jump 2 or Bridge 2, and suddenly your fleet's dead. So we were wandering around with initially kind of 150 people, and the Kestrel became the most feared ship in the entire of Eve, at least to me, because we'd have 100 battleships, we'd see a Kestrel, the screen would lag, and then we'd all be back in the station.
Yeah, and he's right. The mechanic actually was, and if you go back and look at like some of CCP's old promotional videos, I think it's the cool one where they introduced the Asian people. I can't remember it was Black Sun. Bloodlines, yes, the Bloodlines trailer. If you go and look at that, you will actually see what he's talking about, which is a picture of a Ragnarok sending its Doomsday through a Cyno. And the way that you could do it anywhere, but what he's talking about is you had to basically put your nose just outside of the POS shield, and then you could do exactly what he's talking about. And that's how, like, when people talk about like this old battle where the first real Doomsday went off when the Enslaver did that shit with his avatar, it was a Kestrel that showed up on grid in the same system, and he shot the Doomsday through a Cyno through the Kestrel. Real brave, daring stuff.
Yeah. So that wasn't a bug. That was designed.
Yeah, that was designed, and it would kill a battleship. It was that powerful. It would instantly kill a battleship. You could single Doomsday tank if you gimped. You couldn't shoot out as far.
Hold on. Not a battleship, a grid of battleships.
Sorry. So you could have. I mean, it was a 250k smart bomb that was powerful enough to kill a battleship. So
An actual Doomsday,
terrifying. Right? Yeah,
lived up to its name. So what happened after that for you?
So the CEO quit. Sesfan and I took over. Sesfan was the CEO, and I was doing the war stuff mostly, although that makes it sound like he couldn't and didn't, and he was amazing at it. Better than me, I'm sure. And we actually had a very good relationship with Nink through Amiga, as I spoke about earlier. And we came up with a plan. So Sov worked on POSes back in those days. So say a system had 11 moons. If you had 6 active POSes, the enemy could only put up 5, so they had to kill one of your POSes to get Sov. Now, we had a lot of willing, but we didn't have a lot of money. So I had a chat with Nink, and I said, look, have you got any POSes? We're going to POS up a region. and he kind of looked at me like I was mad, but he's a little bit mad himself, and he was like, "Okay, all right, I'll take this risk." And I think he transferred me something like 100 billion posses, which would be the equivalent of about 5 trillion now, if we're talking not the cost of posses, but just the risk involved. So he dumped that in my hangar and said, don't run off. And a bunch of boss guys rejoined. We had the logistics wing of Goonswarm at work. We basically possed up an entire region. And 9-9 was, which was in, I think, Tenerife, was the last system that we possed up. And all throughout that time, I don't think Bob had a single idea. Now, Bob had just come 4 regions. Their logistics were really strained. We didn't know how strained, but it turned out that it was kind of a breaking point. And I remember I was just putting the last POS up that would give me POS supremacy in 9-9. And a Bob interceptor warped in on my Iteron. And at that point, Nink himself, decloaked in a rapier, webbed and killed this interceptor, and the POS went down successfully. And that night, I mean, I logged off. I was exhausted. That night was the night that we started to get numbers back in fleet. A Goon Rifter, I believe it was, managed to decloak Shrike, who had doomsdayed us because we were trying to draw the line at 9-9. A Goon Rifter decloaked Shrike, and we killed Shrike. And at that point, the entire war changed. It was for me personally, it was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my EVE career. It was amazing.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, because Shrike's Titan going down sent a shockwave through all of Nullsec at the time, which is pretty interesting.
And it revitalized Goons as well, as you can probably imagine.
It boosted their morale, yeah. Let's move on real quick to, this is all great stuff. I wish we had more time. We had technical difficulties, but let's move on to modern day MC. What's going on with you guys now? Because there's been some interesting moves going on. Not only a move fleet, but you handed over a Keepstar to the Pope himself.
We're getting rid of all of our Keepstars.
Yeah. One way or another.
In one way or another, right.
Yeah.
Put some context on that. Suaz, Shut Up and Shave, lost a Keepstar right before EVE Vegas, actually. I was listening to it on the way to Vegas. And so that was one Keepstar down, and then this Keepstar that was called Tortuga 2, which was in Bezigran, I think, inside of.
Well, the one in Syndicate was called Karakorum, which is what the Mongols used to name their big command tents. That was our deployable Keepstar. We're gonna have to get a replacement for that one. It basically, the very short version is it unanchored at the wrong time unexpectedly. I'm going to leave it at that, and shit went south really fast. But the guy, asset safety worked out really well. I think that most people just lost some really expensive clones. By a miracle, we didn't lose anything else really. We got people moved out over the next week or so. We even made T-shirts. We had have you seen our Keepstar T-shirts in Vegas? And then we got moved back, and yes, we had. I think we had the 8th Keepstar was the one that we dropped in Beskaren last year in about August, and at the time it was done as part of the whole NetC thing. They were going to do this big, huge trade network, and it was going to be this cool, big, awesome thing. And Sabre, who is the guy I told you about earlier, he was the guy who restarted MC. Mm-hmm. And Suez and myself, we all just thought, okay, well, let's get in on this. Maybe this is a cool thing. We'll freeport it and see what happens. But then Lenny got banned. Lenny Kravitz, who was the guy who basically paid for all of World War B, or as most of the listeners here may know as the Casino War. Yeah. And Lenny got banned, and it kind of died with him. I mean, it really did. I know that there's a lot of there's some folks that are still keeping it running, and there are still NetC Fortizars, and there's still at least one Keepstar, and they're still free ports, and they still do some business, and a lot of people use all of these structures, and it's fine.
Yeah, actually, can I say so?
Sure, please.
So just to be clear, Cribber still has control over it, and not the Beskarian one, but the ones that he did have control over. So Cribber is still the only guy that can kind of pull the plug on that. I know that not a lot of people are using them, but I just don't think that there's any danger of them disappearing or people getting pulled the plug on at any point.
They're kind of developing their own ecosystem with people coming and going since they're free ported. Anybody could use these stations.
Well, I mean, the one in Beskarian has been free ported almost since the day that it went live as well. I changed. I blocked when Goons went north and did the big hit on Tribute earlier this year. I blocked like pretty much everybody's access for like 3 weeks, so that way no one could come around and mess with it in the meantime. And then once all that settled back down a week or so later, I opened it back up again. But now we basically we're looking at how we wanted the changes with the moons and all of the Tech 2 stuff, and just the way the game is going right now. There's just the bottom line of it was that Keepstar, like, it was sitting in the middle of LoSec, and we didn't live there. It was just a big warehouse where some guys stored their supers. There were probably, like, when CO2 died, we opened up our Citadel network, and I lost track of the number of like CO2 corps that or ex CO2 corps that came through there that parked their stuff and moved on. I'm pretty sure that there's more shit from other groups and alliances in that Keepstar than MC had there, and it just wasn't really making us that much money. And I mean that was the original goal, obviously, but we just decided to I didn't want to like pull it up because it's fully rigged and the rigs are like 40 bill a piece, and we thought about selling it and everything else, but I made the mistake a couple of years ago of meeting Max Singularity, and he's just one of the coolest guys I've ever met in the game. And when we met up in Vegas this year, he mentioned to me in one of those little alcoves in the hotel that his guys were kind of looking for a home, and we just got to chatting, and I told him, so this stretches back a little ways, a couple months, and I told him, I was like, listen, we're seriously thinking about just moving out of that thing in LoSec, and would you be interested in maybe setting up shop there as kind of like your Vatican, so to speak? And so that's kind of where that came from. And then it finally we clicked all the buttons I think last weekend, and so it's all his now. He's moving his headquarters there. He's renamed it the Vatican Pope Star, I believe. And it's interesting because there's actually more traffic in that system now in the last week than I've seen in the last couple of months. I mean, he's got people that are showing up there, and I mean, for all I know, you can go there in a month or two and there'll be 50 Citadels parked around that thing. Everybody wants their own little house in space, and it's completely, it's as it was before. It's completely free ported. Anybody from any alliance can come or go through it, park their stuff, move on, and so it's kind of crazy maybe to just like give something like that away, but I don't know. We're doing. Past. Yeah, well,
they had the station to Cribba in Providence to make it a trading hub.
Yeah, true. It's just one of those things. I mean, like, we're fine. We're not exactly Keepstar less, and we don't have any issues with the alliance financially. It was just it seemed like a really cool thing to do, and I couldn't think of anybody else who would treat it better.
Yeah, we agree, and it would be really interesting to see what he does with it. And I love the idea of him attracting people to it and creating a Vatican City. That's awesome.
Well, I thought it was hilarious when we flipped it over and that giant Pope hat appeared above it. I laughed my ass off. I just thought that was great.
That's perfect. So what are you guys doing then? You've moved up north, probably.
Yeah, we've had a little patch of land up in the bottom of Tribute. I mean, that's kind of makes sense considering we fought 3 wars over it in the last year and a half, and we're just doing kind of what everybody else is doing right now, which is just, MC especially, we didn't like pause at any point in the last year or so. We bounced from one thing to the next. I mean, like, most tellingly last year, whenever CO2 and Test were kicked out of the North, we took a contract with CO2 and Test to help them in the South like 3 weeks later. So while, everybody was still like up there crabbing and building and everything else. We bounced to the next thing, and then we went from there, and then we threw some bricks at Provi for a little while, and then we ended up over in Syndicate, and then there was another thing in Tribute, and we just bounced all over the place this year. And it wasn't really until like a week or two ago that I told my guys, okay, let's just let's settle down and kind of do what everybody else is doing, which is, see how high you can get the mining indexes, start building things up and getting ready for the next big thing, if or when it ever happens, or, get ready to be able to, do the things that people want us to do.
Right. Like stuff that Carneros is doing.
Yep.
NC is doing.
Well, everybody is. I mean, this is just, everybody should just basically have like that Hard Knocks crab as their Alliance logo, in my opinion, right now.
Exactly. Well, it's like the holidays, and this is kind of what happens.
But even CCP have called it arms race, haven't they?
Yeah, true.
So it's a race to build weaponry and caches, and now that alphas can handle battleships, you're going to build alphas as part of the weaponry in certain specific areas.
Oh yeah, and seeing basically, and you've got Feroxes fucking everywhere. You've got Megathrons being given away as MPE awards. It's just wild.
Yeah. Well, Carneros, you have a meeting to go to, right?
I do.
You should probably start wrapping up the show. All right. What are you going to do? Talk to your Alliance?
Yeah, I have an Alliance meeting. They're all actually, I can see them waiting in the Alliance meeting room for me.
Okay. Well, we had another topic that we wanted to hit, but we'll save it for next week. And that was the Hilmar talking about the creation of CSM and why it was created, which was pretty interesting.
Oh, God, that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, so that's an article. You can find it. We'll post it here. And as far as meetups, there's one in LA. Ignore the fires. Ignore everything on fire on your way there. But there is one in, well, it's LA, but it's actually near Pasadena. So it's kind of far away from the beach. Dunk Dinkle has more information on that one. And yeah, so a couple of announcements I wanted to make. And that was, one is Talking in Station is going to change pretty soon, probably in January. But one of the things we're going to change is the time. So it's no longer going to be at this time on Saturdays, 1500 UTC. We are going to move it to Sunday and have it 1 hour later at 1600 UTC. We think that's a good time for guests, and that's really what's most important. If you can catch the show live, that's great. We love to have your participation. If you can't, you can listen to it on podcast. But we will be switching to Sunday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and 1600 UTC, which I believe is UK time sometimes. So make a note of that. We'll see you next week at that hour. Okay, so is there anything else you guys would like to leave on? Any comments you wanted to make?
Nothing. Thanks for having me on, buddy. I like doing these things. It always seems like it turns into one of these old guys sitting on rocking chairs talking about things. But
well, I have to say, if it was other games, it wouldn't be as interesting. I think because this is all one continuum, and so a lot of things that you're talking about are the reason that things exist the way they do now, and that means mechanics, but also player events, and also player personalities, and pivotal historical battles and attitudes towards one another. I mean, clearly, there is still a divide between the forces of Bob and Goons. I think if you...
Clearly.
And the Russians are kind of neutral, and they're friends with both sides.
The other thing I think is is a big topic that's worthy of discussion is fraternity and the Chinese menace that is yet to be seen. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting. Wouldn't it be ironic if they became the real enemy, and we all had to team up and fight them?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they take some leaves out of early Goonswarm's books, and I can see them becoming absolutely gigantic.
It's very possible because they are on a separate server officially, but there does seem to be a migration. We discussed this the last 3 shows. It seems to be that we have a lot newer features than they do, so a lot of them are just kind of going through VPNs to play on our server to see some of the new features and stuff like that. I think it was said that they still don't have the buffed Rorquals on their server. So
I do want to stick in here 1 second. Hearing Suez's voice, it takes me back to late night fleets in the Fountain War, and I'm being told how I'm doing everything wrong with my brand new super carriers first time in combat. And
Oh, I'm sorry, dude.
no, it's great. No, it's fantastic. Thank you. And hearing Celine's voice still takes me back to that upstairs conference room in Reykjavik at CCP headquarters, and the CSM meetings, and having to go in there and talk to them about what wasn't ready yet for Incarna and all that.
Karn, honestly, we need to have a NDA is expired show. I think that would be quite a lot of fun. I would very much like to just chat about some of those things.
I think it'll be a record breaker. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
I wanted to print.
And thank you to Danny and Thal also.
Why isn't this coming up? I want to give you a link to Suez singing Little Bees, which I can't seem to grab it. Look for it. I'm going to put it here in chat. Also, you guys are welcome to join the Discord that we have. I'll also put that in there.
I'm available for weddings and bar mitzvahs for a very smallest fee.
Oh God, don't you hate it whenever you
Tickets.
clone jump to the wrong fucking station? Oh God.
Yeah, it's funny. This is on YouTube Rewind. I'm sorry. I was having a lot of trouble clipping it. For some reason, my URL wouldn't produce a proper URL. But there it is. That is the classic Goon Swarm. I think when people saw that, well, by the way, was there an immediate reaction to that, or did that just build over time? Did people
So
like that?
that's actually a really good question. So I wrote. I mean, we talked earlier about the fleet sizes being down to 20 people, and one of the ways that I try to raise fleet sizes was by just entertaining people. And I used to be in bands. Well, I still am in bands, and so I can hold a guitar and hold a tune barely. And I recorded this. However, people said they liked it and great, and it disappeared about a month or two later. But then, I can't remember her name. There was a girl in Goonstorm that did the video, just stop motion the whole thing. I had no idea she was doing it, and then she pinged me and said, do you mind if I release this? And I took a look at about 5 seconds of it, and I'm like, oh my word, please, this is incredible. So I mean, the song's fine. The song's what it is, but for me, the thing that makes that absolutely incredible is the animation. And if you look at the original video, it's got the name of the animator there.
Yeah, I just posted that in chat, so if you want to check that out, I'll put it in the show notes too. Yeah, right. I remember that video. It was hilarious. It looks like she did it like South Park with the cutouts. It looks like a belt, or what do you call it?
Palookatees, that was it.
That was the author?
Yeah, that was the person that made the video. I mean, it was just incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, another classic. And you guys did have great propaganda as Goon Swarm, right? You guys are really intelligent people making some very creative things.
I think when you get so many people together, as long as you can weed out the idiots and keep them quiet, there has to be the potential for greatness, right?
Yeah. So true. Well, thanks for all you guys coming together today. I know it was last second, but we really appreciate it. Daniela, thanks for showing up.
Thanks for having me.
And Suaz, or Shut Up and Shave. Which one do you go by? Which one do you prefer?
Suez, most people call me. And thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll have you back. We'll get Lady Scarlet in here and a few other people. and we'll do another deep dive into history, because there's so much there that we still refer to. There's a lot of inside jokes about all the stuff that you guys did. And Celine, thanks for showing up and helping out.
Always fun, buddy.
We always learn new stuff when you're on. I want to apologize.
That's why I'm saying that. That's why I say we need to have that other show. That will be. I agree with Suis. I think that would get some record numbers on here.
Well, I'm thinking the holidays are a really good time to do that, because people have a lot of, they're doing a lot of family things, which is great. But sometimes people are traveling long distances, or they're, they have free time. So it might be a good time to really meander with a 2-3 hour special. We'll look into that for the, because we're switching to Sunday next week. We're going to end up on the 24th and the 31st. Those are 2 days that are basically family days, but some people may have some extra time that, might tune in for that, or just have the podcast ready for them for those holidays. We'll see. Very soon, we'll make some announcements. I think next week I'm going to dive into who I consider the alliances of the year. So I'm not going to say who they are now, but I guess we'll make it like an award. Talking in Stations Alliances of the Year. There's actually 2. It's a tie for first place. But tune in for that. And Celine, thanks a lot for coming. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you guys very much. All right, we will wrap up this show, and we're going to see you next week on a Sunday. But for now, that's all there is for Talking in Stations. See you next week.